Hello, and welcome to Muse to Sleep, where your worries fade, your thoughts drift, and your mind unwinds through calming curiosities of the past. You'll live just one day as a regular Viking. Tonight, we're going to travel back, far back, to about 1,000 years ago. No danger, no plot to follow, nothing to stay awake for. Just close your eyes and let the world around you slowly dissolve into the quiet fjords of history. You are lying down, still, warm and safe. And now your mind begins to drift backward through time to a cold, windswept coastline somewhere in the far north. It's the land of the Vikings, not the horned helmet warriors from TV, but the real Norse people, farmers, fishermen, traders, and yes, sometimes raiders, who lived hard but meaningful lives over 1,000 years ago. Imagine a rugged village of wooden houses, and some houses built right into hills, nestled into a snowy fjord. The roofs are thatched with straw, the walls sealed tight with clay and ash to keep out the wind and cold. Unfortunately, this also kept in the smoke from the fire, which was sometimes fueled with cow manure. You can smell smoke from a nearby hearth, the scent of pine wood and something meaty boiling in an iron pot. Outside, the air is cold, sharp enough to sting your nose. But inside, it's warm, dimly lit by oil lamps made of clay. A woolen cloak is draped around your shoulders. You're seated on a carved wooden bench, and the only sound is the fire, and someone speaking softly nearby, telling stories. These are not just bedtime tales, but sagas, legends of gods and giants, of sea journeys and strange creatures, of brothers who betrayed each other, and families who endured. In the Viking world, everything had meaning, from the way you cooked your food, to the dreams you had at night. The days were hard, the winters were harder, but the people found purpose in their work and in the stories they passed down across generations. Tonight, you'll listen in on their world, not to stay awake, but to gently carry your thoughts somewhere unfamiliar, somewhere ancient and peaceful. Now, let's begin softly with what the Vikings really ate. Let's stay here, inside that quiet Viking home, and focus for a moment on the smells. They aren't bad, not really, just different, earthier, simpler. There's a stew simmering in the center of the room, a thick, bubbling pot suspended over the hearth. It's not made from anything exotic, just onions, some root vegetables, maybe barley, and whatever meat was available, likely goat, or dried lamb, or even seabird if it was near the coast. You see, Vikings didn't feast every night. They worked with what they had, and what they had was usually local, seasonal, and hearty. They ate what they grew, what they raised, and what they could catch. Barley and rye were staple grains. These were used for porridge, and flatbreads baked over stone or metal. Soft, chewy, and sometimes flavored with bits of wild herbs or ash. They didn't have sugar, so sweetness came from honey, which was precious. It flavored food, it preserved meat, and it was used to brew drink. We'll talk about that part later. Most Viking homes had small gardens. These grew leeks, cabbage, and peas. Not glamorous, but nutritious. If you were lucky, you might also find hazelnuts or wild berries tucked away in clay pots, dried and saved from warmer months. And the meat, if you think of Vikings only as butchers of giant animals, you might be surprised. They raised animals, but they didn't waste anything. Chickens for eggs, sheep for wool, goats and cows for milk. And when it came time to slaughter, every part was used. Organs, marrow, bones for soup, fat for candles. Fresh meat was a treat, often smoked or dried to last longer. Fish was far more common. Cod, herring and eel caught from cold waters and preserved with salt. A Viking diet wasn't a feast, it was fuel. Still hungry, some records suggest they ate horse meat, not often, but in some areas. It was even considered a pagan ritual food, eventually banned by the church when Christianity arrived. And then there were the stranger bites. In harsher areas, Vikings ate things like fermented fish, seaweed, or blood-based puddings, mixed with oats or barley. To us, that might sound unpleasant, but to them, it was warmth, it was calories, it was survival. There were also moments of indulgence. During festivals or weddings, Viking tables filled with roasted meats, pies, buttered breads, and preserved fruits. The meals were louder, messier, filled with laughter and mead. But most days, it was humble food. Thick broth, boiled grains, salty fish, and bread, always bread, slightly burnt around the edges, crusty and dense. And somehow, that's comforting. Simple, real food, hard-earned and gratefully eaten. Let's go just a little deeper into the Viking kitchen. Or perhaps the Viking campfire. Because not everything they ate was pleasant. There were hard winters, crops failed, game ran thin. And when that happened, Viking women got creative. They made something that could technically be called bread, though it was far from soft or warm. It was made from a blend of flour, dried peas, and even pine tree bark. Yes, bark, full of fiber and, surprisingly, vitamin C. It wasn't meant to taste good. It was meant to fill the stomach. Thick, dry, heavy. It likely hit the gut like a stone. And speaking of stones, archaeologists examining Viking bread remains, pulled from ancient settlements in what's now Newfoundland, found tiny bits of grit baked inside. Grit from stone grinding wheels. This means their bread was not only chewy, but slightly crunchy. Not in the good way. Some believe the grit may have worn down Viking teeth over time. Slow, sandpaper-like damage. So maybe their bread fed the body, but not the smile. They ate whale too, meat and blubber, both salted and stored. But not everything was grim. They had cheese, fresh or aged, wrapped in cloth and hung in cool corners. They smoked meat and dried fish over low fires, slowly curing it for long voyages. Some meals were roasted on spits or boiled in great iron pots, hung over the hearth. Others were slow-baked in pits, deep in the ground sealed with glowing stones and thick moss. They drank from horn cups, ate from wooden bowls, and used knives and fingers more than any spoon. Forks were unheard of. They ate like nature intended, by tearing, dipping, and scooping. But there were things you might not be so eager to try. On certain hunting expeditions, or when other food was scarce, the Vikings turned to animals that might make you pause. Horse, seagull, goose, hare, seal, boar, moose, walrus, whale, and yes, even polar bear. Imagine that, a stew thick with seal fat and snow bear meat, served hot, with bark bread on the side. But they were survivors, and in surviving, they found pride, and ritual and story, and even humor. Now that you've tasted the food of their world, it's time to drink like a Viking. But fair warning, their drinks were not always what you'd expect. Let's explore that in the next chapter. Now that you've had your fill of Viking stew and bark bread, you might be wondering, what did they drink? Let's begin with the obvious, because yes, the Vikings did love to drink. They drank ale made from barley, water, and herbs. It was brewed in clay pots, sometimes flavoured with juniper or other bitter plants. There was no hops and no exact recipe. Each household made it differently, sometimes strong, sometimes sour, sometimes better suited for starting a fire than drinking. They drank mead too, a sweet golden brew made from fermented honey. It was considered a drink of celebration and of myth. In Norse legend, mead was sacred. Some believed it gave the gift of poetry, of wisdom, that it could connect mortals with the gods, if only for a few warm golden moments. But their cups were not cups, at least not as we know them. Many Vikings drank from animal horns, most often cattle or reindeer. They were polished, carved and hollowed, worn smooth from use, and drinking from a horn was an art. It couldn't be set down unless it was empty. Its pointed end made that impossible. So once you started drinking, you had to finish it all. At first, it might be a gentle trickle, but tip the horn too far, too fast, and it would become a tidal wave. Owl or mead would rush forward, soaking your beard, your tunic, or worse, spilling onto the floor of your host's hall. Hence, the drunken Viking. Not just a legend, but sometimes a practical inevitability. For those who couldn't afford mead or ale, or during lean seasons, there were other options. Buttermilk, thick and sour, left from butter churning. Fermented goat milk too, tart and stomach-turning by today's standards, but nourishing. Even snowmelt was collected and stored in clay jugs during the winter. Wine. Only the wealthiest Vikings tasted that, usually brought from far-off lands during trade. But the drinking wasn't just about thirst, or even about fun. It was often ritual. At gatherings and feasts, Vikings raised their horns in sumbel, a sacred toast ceremony. Each person would stand, speak a vow, or tell a story, then drink. The horn would pass round the hall, as others shared boasts, poetry, or remembrance. They drank to their ancestors, to the gods, to victories, and sometimes to forget defeat. The drinks warmed their bellies, the words warmed the room. Picture this. A Viking sits alone now at the end of a long evening. His horn is dry, his breath is slow, and the fire's glow reflects in the carved grain of the wooden walls. Tomorrow he'll rise early, but tonight there is nothing left to do but listen to the wind and drift, and you can too. Now, as the fire burns lower, let me tell you what the Vikings believed, not just what they ate or drank, but what they whispered to each other. On cold nights like this one, when the snow fell hard and the sky hung low, they believed the world was shaped by giants, and that the first man and woman came not from clay or dust, but from the sweat of a giant's armpit. Yes, according to Viking legend, our entire species was born from a sweaty giant. And maybe, if that giant had been wearing deodorant, we might never have existed. That same giant, a frost giant, eventually died, and from his blood came a flood so massive it drowned nearly everything. A flood, not of water, but of red. His blood filled the land, a crimson sea. Some say that's where the Red Sea truly came from. And if you've ever looked up at the sky and seen long grey clouds, you might have thought they were mist or fog. But to a Viking, those were brains, the scattered thoughts of a dead giant smeared across the heavens. And how was the sky held up? By 4 dwarves. Their names were North, South, East, and West, each one holding up a corner of the world above your head. Let's just hope their arms don't get tired, Now, about death. If you lived a quiet, peaceful life, if you died warm in your bed, surrounded by your family, you were sent to hell. Not hell with 2 L's, but one. Hell was cold, grey, still, a place for ordinary endings. But if you wanted to go to Valhalla, the great golden hall in the afterlife, you'd need to die with a weapon in your hand, on the battlefield, shouting, bleeding, brave. There, the honoured dead would fight all day, sword to shield, and every night they would rise again, to feast, to drink from the skulls of their enemies, to laugh until the fires burned low. But not everyone made it to Valhalla. Some people, the thralls, were born to serve. Their names were not chosen for beauty or poetry, but for utility and mockery. There was a girl named Blob Nose, another named Fat Thighs, one called Bundle of Rags. The boys were called things like Ashen Face, Draft, and Stinking. They were described as clumsy, ugly, and strong. Their fate, to work, to obey, to belong to someone else. And what about the gods? The Vikings believed in many, but one ruled them all. Odin, the god of war, wisdom, poetry, and death. He had only one eye. He traded the other for a single sip from the well of wisdom. Some say he could see more with one eye than any man could with 2. But Odin was not gentle. He demanded sacrifice, loyalty. There are stories of great trees hung with offerings, dogs, horses, even humans, dangling from the branches like strange silent fruit. One traveller claimed to see over 70 bodies, all sacrificed to the god of death and knowledge. Another god, Frey, ruled over love and fertility. His statues were anatomically complete. So complete, in fact, that one shocked Christian bishop took a hammer to Frey's statue and smashed it to pieces. Eventually, the Vikings turned from the old gods. Around the year 960, a priest named Popo held a red-hot piece of iron and claimed it didn't burn him. He said it was the power of Jesus, stronger than Odin, stronger than Thor. King Harold believed him. And so the Viking world began to change, but the stories never left. There were always sagas of dwarves and frost giants, of monsters and demons, of a final battle to end the world called Ragnarok, when fire would rain from the skies and everything would begin again. And even today, some say the song London Bridge is Falling Down tells of a Viking attack, a clever trick by Olaf the Stout, who pulled the bridge down with ropes tied to ships. Whether true or not, the song remains. The bridge is gone, and the legends live on. So now, as your thoughts wander, know that you are wrapped in a world of old gods, forgotten myths, and distant stars, and it's nearly time to let it all fade. But before we go, let's take one more quiet moment together. Let's return to the silence and settle into sleep. You've travelled far tonight, through the smoky kitchens of long-lost villages, across windswept fields and frozen fjords, and deep into the dreams of gods and giants. Now there's nothing left to learn, nothing more to wonder, only stillness. You're back inside the Viking longhouse now, tucked into a quiet corner, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. The fire still glows, low, golden, gentle. Shadows flicker along the walls, soft and slow. The wind outside hums like a lullaby through the cracks in the wood. The others are asleep. You can hear their breathing, calm and deep, rising and falling like a quiet sea. There is no rush, no fear, nothing to prove. Just the sound of the crackling fire and the warmth against your skin. and the slow, heavy weight of rest settling into your chest. Maybe tomorrow there will be snow. Maybe the boats will leave early. Maybe you'll hear stories of distant kings and falling bridges. But not now. Now is for sleep. The kind of sleep that settles in your bones, that doesn't ask anything of you, that holds you like a memory and doesn't let go. Let the fire burn low. Let the sky turn quiet and let yourself drift. You are safe here. You are warm. And the longhouse will watch over you until morning. Good night, traveller.